Prejudice keeps the mind walled into black and white boundaries. Let's face it, prejudice is a part of the world we live in. Some people are blatant in their expression of prejudice, others try to hide it. But regardless of whether prejudice is hidden or overt, it creates stress. So this is about how do you deal with this kind of stress? As you know, I love doing the work of Byron Katie, and this is a way to deal with any kind of stress, no matter what it is, whether it's working with prejudice or any other type of stressful situation. And so in this article, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use the work of Byron Katie when dealing with a specific type of issue with prejudice. So to make this a little bit interesting, or maybe slightly break it down just a little bit, I've considered three different points of view. The point of view of the victim of prejudice, the point of view of the perpetrator of prejudice, and the point of view of being an observer of prejudice. And all three of these perspectives can be stressful. So let's look at these one by one. First of all, as a victim of prejudice. If you experience prejudice against you, it can be humiliating and enraging, and the experience is often one of powerlessness. The unfairness of it also inflames this feeling of frustration. When faced with a situation that feels powerless, there are two approaches, basically, to try to regain a feeling of balance. The most common approach is to try to control the situation. That's what we often do in our daily life. We try to assert dominance, or we try to run away. We try to control the situation in some way or another. And this can be appropriate. I don't have to stay in a prejudice type of situation. I can get out of there. And sometimes speaking up can change the situation. So this approach has its merits. But sometimes these attempts to do this don't work, and the prejudice continues. So today we're going to talk about a second approach, which is working solely on the internal experience, not so much on the actions, but on the internal experience by questioning how I see the situation, basically how I see the perpetrators of this prejudice. And so that's what I love the work of Byron Katie for. We basically write our stressful thoughts about the perpetrators on paper. I love to use the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet as a guide. This is a perfect opportunity for this. The Judge Your Neighbor worksheet was designed to collect stressful thoughts about someone in a specific situation and to write those down so that they can be questioned. Then quietly, meditatively, when you're back home, safe and out of the situation, you can begin to question the thoughts that you wrote down. You can, first of all, write the thoughts. You wouldn't write them in the situation. Come home, write those thoughts, and then question a few of those. And those raw thoughts are, when you get into it, probably what's making you feel powerless. Things like, he hates me, or she humiliated me, or I want him to include me. I'm being excluded out of prejudice. That thought, I want him to include me, is a powerful, stressful thought. And she should see me as an equal. Again, so powerful. And I need him to put himself in my shoes. So these are raw thoughts. These are the thoughts that may be running in any particular specific situation where somebody is exercising prejudice against you. So if this happens to you, take some time, write thoughts down like this, whatever they happen to be for you, and then go through this process of questioning. Is it true? She should see me as an equal. Is it true? Or I want him to include me. Who would I be without that thought in that moment? When you take your time to do this gently, and I'm just pointing to what you can do, I'm not actually showing you how to do this here. If you want to learn how to do this, then consider taking the Work 101 course, which I offer, or using my startup kit at the workasmeditation.com. So the idea is to take these stressful thoughts and to gently, quietly take your time in a meditative way to question them and to find what is really going on. And you may find as you do this that your suffering depends actually more on how you see the perpetrators and yourself than on how they see you or what they actually do. So only you can discover this, and I encourage you to make the time to go through this process. Okay, so the next perspective is when you're the perpetrator of prejudice. And if you think you're not a perpetrator of prejudice, think again. I would say that all of us have prejudices. It's built into our cultures, it's built into our families, it's built into the ways we think and see the world. So none of us like to think of ourselves as perpetrators, but we all are at various times. And it takes humility to look at ourselves in this way, but if you do it gently and with compassion for yourself, it can be very liberating. What will tell you when you're acting from a place of prejudice? It's always the same thing: stress. If you're judging somebody, putting someone down, excluding, using prejudice in some way, you will feel it. You may not notice it at first, but if you pay attention, any kind of hurtful action that you take is coming from a place of stress, and you will feel it if you look. So you may not think this way at first, but if you feel the stress, just notice what you're thinking. Someone may be annoying you or threatening you. Take a look. What's going on? What are you actually thinking? And then write down your judgment about whomever it is that is causing this feeling of stress. Use the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet again to write out your thoughts about the person that you're prejudiced against, and write in a completely uncensored way. I want you to just get honest. This takes real humility, but if you can be really honest in the way that you write, then you're going to be dealing with the actual thoughts that are running in your brain that are causing this prejudice to happen and the stress around it. So it might be something like, I'm angry with her because she threatens my manhood. Now, I may not want to admit that I have that thought, but if I really look at the situation, that may actually be what the thought is. So let me write it down, uncensored, and then I have a chance to actually look at that and question it. I want her to let me be boss. This is a prejudiced kind of thought, and so again, it takes humility to even admit that I would think that, but if I have it, let me write it down. She should aspire to a different role. I'm kind of writing a little Judge Your Neighbor worksheet here. And as you can see, this is like embarrassing. I wouldn't want anyone to know that I even think this way. I don't even want myself to know that I think this way. But writing a worksheet is like coming out of denial. And it's a very important step to starting to end the prejudice that may be running almost unconsciously in each of us. So another example in a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet format would be, I'm angry at them because they're taking over our country. Typical kind of prejudice type of statement. I want them to go back home. They should respect our way of life. These kind of thoughts are stressful when you look at it, and all of them can be questioned. So if you open your mind, first of all, to admit that you have such thoughts, and then if you take time to question them slowly and meditatively, using the 4 questions and turnarounds of the work, then it can open many internal doors. And what I find is that fear and insecurity often diminish when thoughts like this are questioned. So it's worth the kind of inertia that you may feel to get over that, to actually question these and see what's on the other side. So the third scenario is when you're an observer of prejudice, and this last way that prejudice comes up can also be worked. And the stressful experience can be just as intense when you're observing prejudice as when you're experiencing it directly. So how can you do the work when you're observing it? One way is to notice which side you're taking as you observe. Are you siding with the victim here? Are you siding with the perpetrator? Just notice. Once you see this, then you can use basically the same approaches as I just mentioned about when you're the perpetrator, how to work that, or when you're the victim, how to work that. If you identify with the victim here, then write your worksheet on the perpetrator, or vice versa. If you identify with the perpetrator, write a worksheet on the victim from that point of view. And if it feels right, be the person that you identify with as you write your thoughts. Like write it from the first person present, like write as if you're in that situation, because you are in that situation and you may be identifying there. So write it as if you're there. It's an exercise. Another way to approach this also is to write from the point of view of the third party observer, which of course you are as well. So, for example, he shouldn't be so prejudiced. He's a terrible person. I want someone to shut him down. Like those kind of attacking thoughts on maybe the perpetrator in this case can be questioned, because those thoughts too are violent. And when I think them, I also have that experience of violence inside of me, that stress inside of me. And when I question them, who knows? You may start to see things from a more open point of view. So then you'll, of course, question these thoughts. And if you were in touch with the stress as you wrote, then whatever thoughts you wrote down when questioned will show you the way back to peace for you. This is the beauty of the work. Your stressful thoughts, whatever they may be, will help you find your balance through inquiry. It's very specific. What are my thoughts in this moment? And then when I work them and turn them around, they give me my balance, my medicine in that moment. So, of course, listening to other people do the work is valuable too. But what's most valuable is listening to my own stressful thoughts, writing them down, and then questioning them and finding what is needed for my own balance. And if you need help with this, I invite you to work with me privately. I have private sessions available, and I'm happy to hold you as you explore any topic, including this charged topic of prejudice. So you can sign up for private sessions at theworkasmeditation.com. And I'll end this with a quote from Byron Katie from her book, Loving What Is. And she says, "If I'm mentally in your business or in God's business, the effect is separation." And that's what I think of prejudice as being. It's like separation. I keep you separate from me, and there's fear there, and there's stress there. And what I really want is to join. And that's my nature. So when I question my stressful thoughts, the possibility of joining increases dramatically.